Thermopylae. The word alone conjures an image of ancient warfare burned into the memory of Western civilization. A wall of bronze shields, a pass choked with corpses, and Leonidas, king of Sparta, standing his ground against the full weight of the Persian Empire. For 3 days, in 480 BC, a small Greek force held a narrow coastal corridor against an army historians estimate in the hundreds of thousands, commanded by Xerxes, king of Persia. The 300 Spartans at Thermopylae have become legend, the ultimate symbol of courage against impossible odds. But there is a part of that story most people never hear, and it belongs to a man named Demophilus. When the last Greek warriors were finally overwhelmed at the Hot Gates, the 300 Spartans were not alone. Standing beside them, fighting and dying with them, were 700 Thespians from the city of Thespian, led by their commander, Demophilus. They chose to stay when others fled, and they were annihilated alongside Leonidas and his men. This is the story of Demophilus at Thermopylae, and why his name deserves to be spoken in the same breath as the Spartan warriors that history has immortalized. So who was Demophilus, and how did Thespiae find itself enmeshed in one of the most consequential battles of ancient history? Thespiae was a moderately sized ancient Greek city-state in the region of Boeotia, situated in central Greece, roughly 60 miles northwest of Athens. It was no military powerhouse. Thespiae was not famous for its warriors the way Sparta was, nor for its intellectual output the way Athens was. It was an agricultural community, a place of craftsmen and farmers who trained as hoplite soldiers out of civic duty rather than professional devotion. What set Thespiae apart was its fierce independence. Unlike many of its Boeotian neighbors, Thespiae refused to submit to Theban dominance and maintained a reputation for stubbornness in the face of pressure. It was this same stubbornness that would define the city's relationship with Xerxes and ultimately seal its fate. As the Persian invasion of Greece in 480 BC gathered momentum, Xerxes sent heralds throughout Greece demanding earth and water, the traditional tokens of submission to Persian imperial authority. Dozens of city-states complied, as the threat was genuine. The Achaemenid Persian Empire had already burned cities that resisted. But Thespiae refused. The Thespians understood clearly what Persian occupation would mean, and they made the choice that would write their name into ancient military history. A Hellenic alliance had formed under Spartan leadership to resist the Persian invasion. The Greeks needed to find a defensive position that neutralized the enormous numerical advantage of Xerxes' army. The answer was Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a narrow coastal pass between the mountains and the sea where the vast Persian numbers would count for little. Leonidas was chosen to lead the Greek force, and Demophilus was selected to command the Thespian contingent that would march north with him. The Greek force that assembled was a coalition drawn from across the peninsula. Alongside the 300 Spartans and 700 Thespians, there were Mycenaeans, Phliasians, Mantineans, Arcadians, Corinthians, and others. Approximately 400 Thebans were also present, though their commitment to the Greek cause was questionable from the outset. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus records the total Greek force at around 7,000 men. The first 2 days of the Battle of Thermopylae were a tactical catastrophe for Xerxes. The narrow pass stripped away his numerical advantage entirely. The Spartan warriors fought in rotation with allied contingents, each unit cycling in and out, while the Persians, including Xerxes' elite immortals, his finest troops, were cut down in waves. The Greek phalanx in that confined terrain was devastating, and the Persian army, despite its size, could make no progress against the Greek warriors locked shield to shield, their long spears thrusting forward in disciplined rows. The 700 Thespians under Demophilus fought in the line alongside the Spartan phalanx. Ancient Greek military tactics at this level were not about individual heroics. They were about holding formation, trusting the man on your left, and not breaking under pressure. The Thespians had trained for exactly this. They were hoplite soldiers fighting in the ancient world's most effective formation, and they held their position through 2 full days of brutal combat. Then came the betrayal. A local man named Ephialtes revealed to Xerxes the existence of the Annapia Path, a mountain trail that ran behind the Greek position and could be used to encircle them. Xerxes immediately dispatched a force through the mountains. The Phocian troops guarding the path were surprised and driven off. By dawn on the third day, Leonidas knew the position was lost. At this moment, most of the Greek allied forces departed. Leonidas sent them away, whether out of mercy, strategy, or both. Ancient sources disagree. The Thebans surrendered to Xerxes, but Demophilus and the 700 Thespians refused to leave, understanding the implications fully. Thespiae lay directly in the path of the advancing Persian army. They knew Xerxes would burn their city, which he did. They stayed nonetheless. Herodotus is explicit on this point. The Thespians chose to remain of their own free will because they refused to abandon Leonidas and the Spartan warriors. Demophilus led his men forward in one of history's most dramatic, heroic last stands. The final battle was fought on a small hill near the pass. Encircled on all sides, the remaining Greeks, Spartans, Thespians, and a handful of others were overwhelmed and killed to the last man. What made this sacrifice so remarkable was its context. The Thespians were not professionals conditioned by the Spartan military training known as the agoge. They were citizen soldiers from a mid-tier Boeotian city, fighting alongside the finest Spartan warriors the ancient world had ever produced. Demophilus would have known, as any ancient Greek commander would have known, that the elite Persian immortals at the vanguard of Xerxes' final assault gave no quarter. When the arrows darkened the sky above that hill, at Thermopylae, the 700 Thespians raised their shields and held formation. That discipline, that refusal to break, is what defines them in the annals of ancient warfare. The aftermath confirmed what Demophilus had known all along. Within days of the Battle of Thermopylae, Xerxes marched his Persian army south through Boeotia and burned Thespiae to the ground. The city's population had already evacuated, but the destruction was total. Thespiae was erased as an act of punishment for defying the Persian Empire, the same defiance that had sent Demophilus and his men to the hot gates in the first place. The city was eventually rebuilt, but it was never the same as it once was. Its greatest moment had already passed, written in blood at Thermopylae. Demophilus's name survives only because Herodotus preserved it, a single line among thousands in the account of the Persian Wars. He left behind no monuments, no famous speeches, no legendary single combat. What he left was the fact of his presence and his refusal to abandon Leonidas. The Thespians at Thermopylae were not ordered to stay. They were not bound by Spartan law or cultural compulsion, the way Leonidas and his 300 were. They made a free choice, led by a man whose name most people have never heard. The forgotten military history surrounding Thermopylae matters precisely because it complicates the clean narrative. Thermopylae was not purely a Spartan story. It was a story about what ordinary men, farmers and craftsmen from a city that history barely remembers, chose to do when it mattered most. Demophilus and his 700 Thespians chose to stand with Leonidas at the hot gates, knowing full well that the Persian Empire would swallow them whole. And indeed they stood, accepting their fate, but fighting with valor until the bitter end.